Yeah.
Is it starting or has it? Okay, now it started. So,
Yeah.
very glad to welcome Nirmal ma'am here, and very
Thank
good
you very
to
much.
very
I'm also very pleased to be here, to address your students about the theories of international relations.
yeah.
Um, and I hope that they have some background in international relations or
For most of them, it's first time.
okay. So I
Yeah,
will try to keep it simple and I will try to, give some examples in order to make theoretical
yeah,
perception clear to
yeah,
them. Okay.
sure.
All
And
right.
just one thing before you begin, as I already told you, the nature of variety in our class, we have international students,
Uh-huh.
mostly from sub-Saharan Africa,
Okay.
and we also have from within India students from various states, not
Uh-huh.
just one place. They are mostly from the north,
Uh-huh.
Bihar, Rajasthan, Gujarat,
Okay.
UP,
Uh-huh.
Delhi, Uttarakhand. So that's another thing. And now, without taking much time, I will invite you to and request you to
Okay.
go
All
ahead with
right.
your. And students are here. Please
Uh-huh.
switch on some of your videos if ma'am wants to see you. And maybe ma'am will speak for another 30-35 minutes at least, maybe around, uh, as far as you are okay with it. And then we have a chat bar on the right side. They can whatever question comes to their mind,
Mm-hmm.
they can keep posting there,
Okay.
and
All right.
and when we have a question answer session at the end,
Huh.
we can address them. You can address them one by one and
Okay.
discuss them.
All right.
So
Good.
now here is to you, ma'am. Okay.
Okay. So yeah. So I'm going to talk about the theories of international relations as we are talking about the realist and the liberal approaches to the international relations. These are the two approaches which are very important in international relations to understand uh, uh, what international relations is or what international politics is. So, when we see international politics, realist approach had been the oldest and the most dominant approach to the international politics. There are various other theories, which have been existing, like Marxist theory, feminist, but they are, perceptions. So realism is one of the theories which is most important theory and which had been dominating the discourse of international politics throughout the existence of or the emergence of this discipline. So today we will talk about realism and we will also discuss liberalism because liberalism emerged in reaction to realism. So we will try to understand why realism emerged in reaction to realism. What was the problem with realism? So first of all, we have to understand what is liberalism and what are the basic assumptions behind realism. What are the different types of realist theories because they have been transforming and changing from time to time, and then we will discuss about the liberal theory, what are the basic assumptions, and then we will make the comparative study of neorealism and neoliberalism. So this is the framework of my talk. So in this regard, I will be talking about the philosophical ideas that provided the basis of these theories. So first of all, so for the international politics is concerned, how realists perceive international politics. They perceive international politics very anarchical. This is the first feature of international politics. All these, realists believe that international politics is anarchical because in their perception, there is no world government which can govern the behavior of different units in the world. For instance, we see that in the domestic politics, there is government. And government has its own rules and regulations to govern the behavior of people. So if the people do not obey the laws of the country, they can be punished. So these laws are to government and the laws are to maintain order in the country. But in international politics, we find out there is no world government. though there had been international institutions and organizations like League of Nations or UNO, but these institutions are, they cannot impose their decisions on any of the country. They are not governments. They are the institutions where countries can sit and they can talk about their problems. And if their decisions are not acceptable to any of the countries, they may not accept their decisions. So that's why, so for the international politics is concerned, it is considered anarchical, or it is compared with the state of nature. If you have studied about political thought, before the states came into existence, there used to be a state of nature. And according to Hobbes, the state of nature was always in the state of war. I mean, there was a constant state of war in the state of nature, because there was no government, and most of the people, according to Hobbes, humans are very selfish. Humans are very egoist, they are nasty, they are brutish, they are quarrelsome. So because of their nature, each human tries to, or he aspires to maximize power at the cost of another person. So those who are powerful, that used to exploit the weaker people, and there used to be conflict in the society. So according to Hobbes, it was the state of nature, that was always in conflict. So these realists compare international system with the state of nature, because there is no government. Just like in state of nature, there was no government. And humans, whom Hobbes says that humans are very selfish and nasty and quarrelsome, all the units in the international relations, or in the world system, they are identified with such selfish humans. So each state tries to maximize power, at the cost of another in the international politics. So international politics can never be peaceful. International politics is always conflictual. It is always anarchical. And because each unit in the international politics acts independently, autonomously, and the way it wants in order to maximize its power. So the second principle, so it is clear, I hope it is clear, that the international relations is anarchical. International politics is anarchical. International system is anarchical. The second principle of the realist approach to international politics is they treat state as a principal unit. Because in the international system, it is the country which acts as a unit. And the survival of the state is the primary objective of any government. So government, it's the first duty of the government to protect the geography, the land, resources, and people of that particular country. So in order to give protection, to protect the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of any country, these governments try to maximize power. So this is the third factor. So first factor is that the international politics is anarchical. Second factor is that state is the primary unit, and it is the duty of the governments to protect the state. So in order to protect these states, the states governments try to maximize their powers. So power, usually we think in terms of military power. But here, of course, military power is had always been the primary factor in the realist approach to international politics. But then it is both military as well as the material power. Because it is on the basis of the military power that countries used to maximize their material power. As you have seen that, European countries created empires all over the world on the basis of their military power. And because they became materially well off, so they were maximizing their military power. So both military power and material power, they're complementary. But only by having material power, if you do not have military power, you cannot defend your country. So according to the realist approach to international politics, the state is a power maximizer, because state can achieve the objective of state security only if it maximizes its power. So according to Morgan Thau, one of the philosophers and scholars of international relations, politics is international politics is nothing but the struggle for power, because each country tries to maximize power. And according to Clausewitz also, he said that war was a political instrument, that if any country wants to acquire its political objectives, then they use war as a political weapon. If countries want to acquire any land, any resources, any markets or anything, they used to resort to the use of military warfare. So according to
is it right, ma'am, that they just go ahead with it, right? They don't consult other nations regarding this, as far as this approach is concerned.
Beg your pardon?
Sorry, Anand, questions are allowed only at the end. This is a...
Okay.
Yes, please.
So let me complete, and then
Yeah.
I hope, am I clear so far?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Just a second. Just post your questions on the chat bar, but don't interrupt in between and ask, please. Okay, just post your questions. Ma'am will address all the questions at the end. Last 15-20 minutes, we have time. So,
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, ma'am.
No, that's okay. So this is the third important factor of the realist approach, and that power is considered as an important element, that each country tries to maximize power, and on the basis of the military power, states try to maximize their economic power or the material power. And as we have seen that it is on the basis of the military power that these countries acquired empires, and even the United States of America. It was an economic power. It was economically very well off, but it was only after the First World War that US was recognized as militarily a powerful country. But after the Second World War, during the Second World War, when United States acquired nuclear bomb and it used atom bomb against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it emerged as a superpower. So it is power that gives status and power position to a country. So it is very important to have military power in order to emerge as a powerful country. So it is only on the basis of power, the military power, that countries try to maximize they try to ensure their state security. So on the basis of this power, the fourth principle that comes up is the balance of power. Here I want to maintain that, every country, when we talk about state security, it is not that countries acquire some power which is enough to ensure their state security. Most of the countries are in a constant arms race. If you look at US and USSR, or if you look at the European countries earlier, but in earlier time, because there used to be secret diplomacy, there was no transparency. So it was very difficult to assess the military capability of the adversaries. But in the contemporary times, we see that US and USSR, they had been in constant arms race. I mean, both were nuclear countries, and they were sure that they were not supposed to fight wars. But still, they were constantly they were in arms race, and they were trying to acquire more and more nuclear weapons, because no superpower wanted to give this impression to the other country that it is lagging behind. So, when a country if A country acquires more power as compared to the B, then B becomes vulnerable to the aggression of a country A. So though nuclear arms race was number game, but the basic objective was to maintain the balance of deterrence. So it is the balance of deterrence or balance of power that prevents wars. So in nuclear age, it's different. In nuclear age, balance of deterrence, even if you have minimum nuclear capability, you can deter any country. But in the conventional age, when realism had emerged, classical realism, we are talking about classical realism, at that time, the basic objective was to be in arms race, to try to maximize, as much weaponry and military capability as possible in order to, deter your adversary from attacking you. So balance of power was the crux of the realist approach to international politics. Another principle of realist approach to international politics is war. As you are maximizing your weapon systems, if a country is trying to maximize its weapon systems, and if another country feels that it is offensive capability, you may be developing your capability for defense purpose, but if your adversary feels that it can be offensive, you can launch attack on the other country, then it can create the confusion of situation of confusion or suspicion, and then it might lead to war. So this way we find that war was, according to realists, war is an essential element of international politics. You cannot think of international politics without war. War was an endemic disease of international politics. And they went to the extent of saying that the history of Europe was nothing but the history of wars. Because all the time these countries were indulged. And when I visited Europe, I went to Versailles Palace. It was such a beautiful palace. And our tour operator told us that Napoleon did not get even a single day to live in this palace, because all the time he was away to fight wars. So I don't know, in this shows that how these countries had been indulged in warfares. So if war was, according to the classical realist approach, war is an endemic disease. And Clausewitz considered war as a tool, political tool to achieve national objectives. So this way, the last principle of the classical realist approach to international politics is that realist approach or international politics is value free. It has no value for ethical principles or morality values. So this is all about realist approach to international politics. And E.H. Carr had gone to the extent of saying that if a country resorts to war to protect the national integrity or to maximize its power, then that is the moral duty of the state. So that act will be the act of war to protect state security, will be considered as an act of morality. So this way we find that this was the classical approach to international politics. That state is, international politics is anarchical. State is the principal unit. For the national interest of the country is to protect the state security, sovereignty, territorial integrity, and in that process, states try to acquire power. When they try to maximize power in that process, they come into conflict with other states, and it leads to wars. And in international politics, there is no place for morality. All the states act very aggressively, and they try to emerge as each state tries to compete to maximize its power to be the most dominant power in the world politics. So, and then you will find that we have to discuss that how this theory was evolved. What are the philosophical ideas that provided basis for this realist approach to international politics? So when we talk about the realist approach in the Western discourse, mostly we talk about Machiavelli and Hobbes. But I would like to mention in here that you might have heard of Cortelyia. He was the first realist thinker. But unfortunately, we do not find mention of Cortelyia in any of the writings of international relations. The reason is that international relations is Eurocentric, and this has been written, all these theories have been written on the experiences, on the basis of the experiences and the interest of these Western countries. So that's why, but at the same time, I tell you that most of these countries, they talk about Cortelyia. Even in the US War College, I was surfing some of the videos, and I found out that Cortelyia from India and Sun Tzu from China, their strategies and their statecraft theories, they are taught in the US war colleges. And here I would like to also like to tell you that in the Western writings, Cortelyia, when Cortelyia appears or it is mentioned, he's mentioned as Machiavellian. So it looks like a mockery, because Cortelyia had written in 300 BC, whereas Machiavelli had written thousands of years after Cortelyia had written. So Machiavelli should be called Cortelyan and not Cortelyia as Machiavellian. So here I want to tell you that why Cortelyia is called a realist, though it is not mentioned in any of the theories of international relations, but Cortelyia was the first realist. Because I'm talking for the audience of Indians, Indian Indian audience. So here, I just want to talk about international politics from the Indian perspective as well. And I will be giving you a lot of examples from India. So, so far the Cotelian realism is concerned, he mentioned that he emphasized the significance of strong ruler and strong military force in order to ensure the security of the state. But his Cotelian realism was very different from Western realism, because Cotelia gave more importance to welfare of people. He gave more importance to internal stability. He wanted that people should have confidence in the government, because he felt that if there is internal instability, if there is any kind of unrest within the country, that country can never secure its territorial integrity. So here we find out the Westerners never talked about it. And then if you look at Saptang theory of Cotelia, he places welfare of people on the its ranking higher than the this military power. So military power is also important. So, and another factor which I would like to talk to you about Cotelia is that Cotelia did not give that much of importance to war. He says that war should be used only as a last resort. I mean, if you cannot achieve your objective or ensure your security by other means, by diplomatic means, then only you should resort to war. Here, so Indian realism or Cotelian realism was very different from the Western realism. So Western realist thinkers are Machiavelli and Hobbes. When we see Machiavelli, who wrote in 15th century, he wrote his book Prince. And in that book, he wrote that the prince should be very strong. And he focused on the power of the prince because he was writing in a particular context when Italy had been facing a lot of invasions from the neighboring countries. And every time all the neighbors used to attack Italy, and they used to plunder and used to go back. So Cotelia said that who will ensure the security of the country? So he maintained that the king should be very strong. He should be strong like a lion, and he should be diplomatic like a fox. And he stated that in the international politics, the king has to be very, very aggressive, and there is no place for morality in international politics. So this realist approach to international politics is based on this theory of Machiavelli. Another philosopher is Hobbes, whose ideas provided the basis to the realist approach to international politics. When Hobbes was writing in the 16th century, at that time, he was writing in a particular context, because Hobbes, at that time, England was going through the Civil War situation. And so he found that there was total anarchy. And at that time, he stated that the state of nature is in a constant warfare situation, because people are very selfish. So all these people decided to have a contract to hand over their own rights to a government which should maintain order and should look after the interest of the people. So Hobbesian ideas provided the basis to the realist approach, because now state of nature is compared with the international situation, and each country in the international relation is perceived as the selfish human of the state of nature, as projected by Hobbes. Another thinker whose ideas provided basis to the realist approach to international politics is Thucydides. He also emphasizes on the human nature, that all humans aspires to be in the dominant position, as a result of which they come into conflict, and that's why international politics is conflict-ridden. E.H. Carr also talked about, I've already mentioned that E.H. Carr had talked about that there is no place for morality in the international politics. So here, I would like to say that so far the realist approach to international politics is concerned, it is based on 3 pillars. One is statism, second is self-help, and third is survival. Statism means that the primary objective of the government is to protect the security of state. And for the protection of the security, one has to help oneself. You cannot rely on any other country or any ally or any international organization, because, if you are not prepared to take care of your security, nobody is coming to protect you. I give you the example of Pakistan. When Bangladesh in 1971, when Bangladesh was, fighting for the right of self-determination, at that time, Pakistan asked United States to help Pakistan, and United States had sent its 7th Fleet to the Bay of Bengal. But at that time, USSR had intervened, and it warned United States that in case US gets involved in this war, then USSR will also get involved in the war. And US took its 7th Fleet back from the Bay of Bengal, as a result of which Pakistan lost Bangladesh. So we find out that if a country is not prepared to take off its territorial integrity and security, then that state cannot survive. So state security, its survival depends on its self-help, its power, its military strength. So this way, according to realists, military power is very, very important. So state is a power maximizer. If you define state from the realist perspective, state is a power maximizer. The objective of the state should be to maximize power. If you are in a powerful position, you are not vulnerable, you can secure your territorial integrity and sovereignty. So then, I would like to talk about neorealism. This classical realism got improved or refined in 1960s in the form of neorealism. At this time, Kenneth Walt had given his difference of opinion from the classical realists. He said, no doubt the international relations or international system is anarchical, but he refused to accept the idea that states can be compared with the selfish humans or nagging humans or conflictual humans. He said that the international systems, the units do not act because they are selfish or they are quarrelsome. Each country in the international system acts according to the structure of the international systems. So he says that international system is structured by the major powers. International relations is in international system. You find that there are certain countries which are more capable, they are more powerful. They determine the structure of the international system, and rest of the units in the international system, they become part. Their action in the international system is determined according to their capability, their power capability. I give you the example like US and USSR after the end of Second World War. US and USSR emerged as the two superpowers, and they created two poles in the international system. So some of the countries, Afro-Asian and Latin American countries, some of them joined United States, and some of them joined USSR. It's not that they were conflicting, they were this thing. It is according to the structure of the international system that governed the behavior of these countries. So according to Kenneth Waltz, in this system, countries should not act as power maximizers, they should act as security maximizers. So countries should try to acquire only that much of military power which is necessary to ensure their security. So the power should not be the objective of the state. They should not indulge in an unending arms race. No doubt he says that there should be balance of power, but he says that if countries indulge in an unending arms race, that will not ensure the security. So they should have only that much of military capability, which is essential, because now international politics has changed. Earlier it was easy for countries to create empires, to attack others, so they were the power maximizers. But in the international politics, in the contemporary world, each country is sovereign. Every country has right of self-determination. No country can capture another country, in the international system. So in this context, Kenneth Walt is saying that state should be a security maximizer by acquiring a relative power position in the international system. So he accepts that there has to be balance of power, but he rejects that war, and he rejects war as a political tool. So he differs from the classical realist on two grounds. One, that the state's behavior should not be compared with the selfish and nasty humans in the state of nature. Second, war is not a political instrument. Third, state is a security maximizer, not a power maximizer. But this Kenneth Walls' realism is defensive realism. He says that countries should prepare for defense, not for offense. But his ideas are questioned by Mearsheimer, who maintained that how you will decide that how much capability is required for your security. And he also says that, of course, any country wants to maintain a status quo. But how do you know about another country? For instance, you are preparing for your defense, but your action may appear as offensive for your adversary. For example, when India tested Prithvi during Vajpayee's administration, at that time, Pakistan, in our perspective, it was defensive action. But in Pakistan's perspective, it was offensive. And after a few days, they also launched a Gauri missile. So, what I'm saying is that if you're taking any action which appears defensive in your perception, it may appear offensive. So it is very difficult to differentiate whether your capability is for offensive or for defensive. So Mearsheimer, he states that Kenneth Walls' relative power capability for the security purposes not acceptable. The state has to be power maximizer, because if one country acquires more power, it can make the lesser powerful country vulnerable. The security can be vulnerable. And another point that Mearsheimer is making is that, of course, Kenneth Walls was interested in maintaining the status quo. But he states that Mearsheimer says that even if any particular country wants to maintain a status quo, the adversary, there may be some countries who want to change the status quo. I give you the example of fascist powers before the Second World War. United States and West European countries, they were indulged in the economic crisis. There was world economic crisis, and they were not interested in war. But there's Hitler and Mussolini and the militarists in Japan, they were determined to change the status quo, and they dragged the entire world in the war. Similarly, I give you the example of Pakistan. Like, if India wants status quo after independence, we were interested in maintaining status quo. But Pakistan wants Kashmir, and it is revisionist power in our perspective. So any country which wants to change the status quo is bound to resort to war. So according to Mearsheimer, you need to have very strong power position in order to prevent any country from attacking you. So the state security, according to Mearsheimer, the state has to be power maximizer. Then only state can ensure the security. By having a relative power position to be a security maximizer, it can put state security in danger. The third type of approach to international politics is the neoclassical approach to international politics. After the Cold War came to an end, and US had introduced globalization, and Fukuyama had maintained that the demise of Soviet communism means the triumph of liberalism, and all the countries should, democratize their political system. They should liberalize their economic system, and it will ensure the security. So at that time, liberalism was becoming very, popular. But we find that the US perception got changed after 9/11 attack, when US World Trade Center was attacked by the terrorists in 2001. After that, a realist approach to international politics again emerged on the forefront of international politics, because United States security again emerged as the top priority of state. So strategic interests again, and the military factor is again considered very significant in the change scenario, because the Soviet Union has disappeared as a main threat to the international peace and security and US security, but there are so many other threats which are posing insecurities to the United States and the other countries of the world. So this way we find out that the realist approach has been changing, and it has been evolving and developing, but it still continues as the most dominant approach in international politics. So I think realism is clear. Now let me move on to liberalism. So what the liberal approach is concerned, It emerged in reaction to realism. When we talk about liberalism, it emerged. I would like to tell you that international relations emerged as an autonomous discipline after the First World War only, and this liberalism also emerged after the First World War, and it was a reaction to the agony and the destruction and the sufferings that the First World War had created for the whole world. Because the First World War was very destructive and it was very painful also. Because, in the war, a lot of people got wounded and the medical science had not advanced that much. The antibiotics had not been introduced and people were wounded and they were suffering. So the war was very, very painful for the humans. And you might have heard of this pandemic that had taken place after the First World War, the Spanish flu. All the soldiers who were fighting, that all the third world countries like India, the lakhs and lakhs of soldiers had been dispatched to the European countries to fight on behalf of Great Britain. So all the soldiers from the third world countries, they had gone to the European countries and they caught this flu. And when they went back to their countries after the war was over, they took this flu with them. And, crores of people got killed in this pandemic. In India itself, we lost around 2 crores people. So, as a result of this war, President Woodrow Wilson, the president of United States, he wanted how to prevent such kind of war, what to be done with international politics, that we should prevent the occurrence of such kind of wars in future. So he realized that, of course, international politics is anarchical, but he said that it's not that humans are selfish and nasty and, things like that. They are rational also. So they can make, special efforts in order to make international politics or international relations or the world a more peaceful place to live. So in this regard, President Woodrow Wilson wanted that, earlier, all the countries who used to win wars, they used to impose some, harsh conditions on the vanquished countries. So Woodrow Wilson wanted that, first of all, each country should be given the right of self-determination. He introduced 14-point programs in order to create justice in the world politics. He wanted that all the countries who are vanquished in the war, who are defeated in the war, they should be given just treatment. If they are given unjust treatment, harsh treatment, then, it will lead to another war. It can never bring peace. So President Woodrow Wilson wanted that there should be some provision that countries should not interfere in the hello?
Yes,
can I continue?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I hope I still have some time.
Maybe another 7-8 minutes, because
okay,
then,
I just wind up. Okay.
Because then we can discuss some things, maybe
Okay,
their queries,
right.
and
So
but yeah, you can tell about liberalism.
Okay,
Don't worry.
All right. So, according to, so this, liberal approach was introduced after the First World War. And liberals believed that the world can be made a more peaceful place to live by introducing certain special provisions. For instance, first was that the countries, the First World War or any kind of war in the history had taken place not because of the nasty nature of the state, but because of imperialism. It was the selfish interest of these countries that dragged most of the countries in the world in the war. And second, there's democratic countries like United States, they felt that it was the autocratic or authoritarian natures of the governments that dragged the countries in the war. So he wanted that, first of all, there has to be certain changes in the political and economic systems in the countries. All the countries of the world should introduce the democratic political systems. So because, if a country has a democratic system and representatives of people are ruling over the country, they will look after the welfare of people, they will be spending less on armaments, and that country will, eliminate the chances of war. And then, liberal approach also introduced that the countries should introduce the economic liberalism. neoliberalism or the free trade system. Economic cooperation among countries will sideline their political differences, and all these countries, economic cooperation in one area can lead to the cooperation in other areas as well, and it can eliminate the chances of war. So liberals felt that European countries, instead of earning profit or economic prosperity by imperialism, they should introduce economic cooperation in all countries of the world, so that the war can be eliminated and all the countries can prosper and there can be peace in the world. Third, a proposal of this liberal thinker was that there should be an international platform, because earlier wars were taking place because there was no international platform where countries, disputing parties, could meet and could resolve their conflicts in a peaceful way. So now it was proposed by Woodrow Wilson that there has to be an international organization where all the countries can resolve their conflicts by dialogue, by conciliation, by arbitration, by mediation. So as a result of which League of Nations came into existence. So we find out the basic objective of liberal philosophy was to introduce political democratization, economic liberalization, cooperation among nations through international organization, and also to eliminate arms race, disarmament. According to liberals, arms itself causes war. So, and they wanted that in case, still, if any country wants to change the status quo, if any country resorts to war and it attacks another country, then all the countries of the world, they should come for the help of the victim nation. It was the provision of collective security system. But we find out that the United States had withdrawn from both Treaty of Versailles and collective security system, League of Nations. So as a result of which, both failed, as a result of which Second World War took place, and realists again occupied the realist approach again dominated the discourse of international politics. So here I would like to talk about neoliberalism, because though after the end of two world wars, the Cold War emerged and the realist approach to international politics was the most dominant approach. But in 1960s and 70s, there was a revival of neoliberalism. And in this regard, I would like to say that John Cohen and Joseph Nye, they maintained that the world has become interdependent. Earlier, only military force was considered important as a factor of power, but now economic prosperity was also considered as a factor of power. For instance, countries like Japan and Germany, they became economically prosperous and they were considered as powerful. And then we found out that all these countries became interdependent. So Joseph Nye and this Cohen, they maintained that economic factor is equally important, and the strategic factor has lost its significance. I mean, that kind of significance, because they found out that these wars didn't take place in most of the European countries, in the northern worlds. Most of the warfare had taken place in the southern world. And for instance, in Korea, Cuba, Vietnam, Afghanistan, all these third world countries had been facing long warfare, though they were the extension of the Cold Wars. But we find out that the strategic factor was not important, because when Cold War began, NATO emerged. At that time, the focus of attention was on Europe. But we find out that no war occurred in the northern world. Most of the wars took place in the southern world. But now that's why they stated that the world should cooperate. They should cooperate economically, and they should work for the economic prosperity of all the countries of the world. But now we find out that so for the liberal theories are concerned, they are based on some of the philosophical ideas like Locke, who maintained that who emphasized the significance of civil liberties and capitalist economy. Bentham also emphasized the significance of people's cooperation through international organizations. Kant talked about the political democratization. So here, in the new world, after the end of the Cold War, we had witnessed the neoliberalism, because USSR had disappeared as a threat to the world politics. The United States had introduced this policy of neoliberalism because it was felt that there are various factors of insecurities like environment, ethno-religious conflicts, migrations, human security. And these threats are common to all the countries, rich or poor, north and south. So all the countries of the world have to collaborate, and they have to make collective action on terrorism. They have to make collective action to deal with these threats. So there has to be, and all these agencies have to, all these countries have to, all these units in the world system have to collaborate through the international agencies in order to deal with these insecurities. So here I would like to say that this neoliberalism theory was challenged after United States terrorist acts, terrorist warfare in 9/11, and again the neoliberalism, classical neoliberalism emerged. Now both neoliberalism and classical neoliberalism are okay. They are there. For instance, Neoliberalists want to focus on humanitarian factors, and Neoliberalists are still giving importance to the strategic factor and state security factor. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, ma'am. Sorry to rush you through.
No. Thank you, because these theories are pretty wide, vast theories.
Yes,
but I just wanted to give you the brief and some idea what these theories are and how they perceive international relations from two different perspectives.
Yeah, because it's not easy to club them all together in few minutes. I know it's a challenge because they are loaded theories with a lot of examples, and we already have questions from 2 students. Others can also post questions here. Meanwhile, I'm being the moderator.
See the questions.
I will read them out for you if you want.
Okay.
Okay, and maybe then you can collectively answer them if you wish. Because we have another 10-15 minutes we have.
Okay.
So I think so far we have questions from 2 students, and others are invited to post them here if they have. So Anand's first question is that, can we say, that question he asked in the beginning of the lecture, that can we say that initially IR, international relations, was nothing but one-sided policies of nation states and countries?
Okay.
That is his first query. Then the second query is from Aditya. He says, why balance of power correlates with security maximization and not economic strengthening?
Okay.
Like that, Aditya says that power should also be related in terms of economic power than investing in strengthening defense in this century. Okay. And then the third question is again from Anand. He says, so in current times, most countries are taking up realist approach towards IR. That's a question mark. Like, he thinks it's more like a comment, but he's leaving it open in the form of a question mark. Fourth query is again from Anand. He says, what if there is some justification for the act of war, like a terror cell harming the other countries and other nations and the other nation is now willingly stopping them, and rather than helping the terrorist? It was very, maybe later I'll ask him to rephrase this question, but I think his main question is, what if there is some justification for the act of war? And out of all the questions received, another question, last question, is from Aditya again. He says, ma'am, I wondered whether the efforts to achieve balance of power does not lead to more chaos rather than peace. You can answer.
No, I understand all these questions. Can I answer?
Yes, you can.
Anand, your first question is that international relations was one-sided policies. I told you in the beginning that international relations, the discipline, emerged after the First World War, and it is Eurocentric. It was based on the experiences and on the interest of the European powers. And those powers, when we talk about power maximization or wars or conflicts and all this, these were the European countries, who were monopolizing the entire international politics. So all the southern countries' basic needs were, were more related to socio-economic conditions. So you are right that it was this was because it was Eurocentric. It is very natural because international relations was Eurocentric. If you look at the Westphalia Treaty, which gave the right of sovereignty to every country in the world, it was practiced only in the European continent. It was not practiced in other countries of the world because European countries had created empires all over the world. So international relations was Eurocentric. So it is only, that's why they had one-sided policies. They were talking about, how to protect their interests, how to maximize, how they perceive international relations, because they were already in this power position. So they wanted to maintain the status quo by maximizing their power, dominant power position. So I think I am clear. You have?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Second question is Aditya's balance of power. How balance of power maximizes a country's security. Balance of power is, I told you that in earlier time, because there was secret diplomacy, the means of communications and surveillance were not that advanced. So there used to be secret diplomacy. And at that time, each country used to, probing in the dark, thinking that the other country is having probably more weapons. And some countries used to overestimate their capabilities also. For instance, Russia had resorted to war during the First World War because it thought that it is more powerful. And Germany was also overconfident. It thought, thinking that it would win the war because it was more powerful. So, balance of power, but in the present context, it is very important to have balance of power. For instance, I give you the example of South Asian subcontinent. When USA had nuclear weapons, Russia wanted to have nuclear weapons in order to counterbalance US. And when China acquired nuclear weapons, India wanted to have nuclear weapons in order to counterbalance China. Because if one country is more powerful and other country is lesser powerful, then that country always becomes vulnerable. For instance, in 1962, till 1962, India had been focusing only on the economic development. And our defense was very weak. And as a result of which, we had faced so many wars. We had faced China war in 1962, and we faced wars from Pakistan and others. But after that, we decided to develop our defense capabilities. So it is very important to have balance of power in order to and strengthen your defense capabilities, not to be in weaker position or in vulnerable position. Is it clear, Aditya?
Yes, ma'am.
That maximize, you have to acquire your power, but you're saying why not strengthen your economic power, right? And on the basis of your, you have to have some kind of synergy between defense and development. Take the example of India. Initially, India was such a, economically and socially, politically, from every point of view, it was so weak. So we had focused only on the economic development, and we wanted to develop develop friendly relations with all the neighboring countries, so that we should not have conflict with them. But what happened? We had to change our direction. Like we had to divert our resources to the defense capabilities after we faced war from China. So it is important to develop economic capability. And this is what Japan and Germany did. They developed their economic capabilities and they have not resorted to nuclear weapons. But, at the same time, there are certain countries who are facing such adversaries who want to change the status quo. I give you the example of China. I give you the example of Arabian countries who want to wipe out Israel and they want to rejoin Palestine. They want to fight for the cause of Palestine. So here, economic development is very important. But at the same time, you cannot think of, and this is what United States did. Initially, United States and most of the European countries, they had developed economically and then they developed militarily. But if you take the example of Europe, first they developed militarily, they fought wars with the other countries, they acquired more economic power, then they strengthened their defense capabilities more, then they are complementary to each other. So I think that there has to be some kind of synergy between defense and development. You cannot have focus on one while ignoring the other. Is it clear, Aditya?
Yes, ma'am, completely.
Okay. Anand, you're saying that...
Just a second. There is one more question, if you can add. we have received from Ronak. I will read it out if you want. Is realism a principle of foreign policy which seeks to address international questions in practical way rather than idealistic or ideal principles like cooperation or collective responsibility? For example, Mr. Trump America First can be viewed as a step which ensure American realism. It has different dimensions like protectionism, justifying war for self-defense, interfering in domestic affairs of other countries. As you said, ma'am, nothing is called ethics in world politics, and this holds good for realism. I believe realism is not about selfish foreign policy, rather it is more practical and holds it. That is his view, but you can
Okay.
address that.
No, he's right. I will address that. Okay. So let me talk about to Anand that his question is there any justification for the acts of war, terrorist acts? And this is what he's saying. I think that at this point of time, as I mentioned earlier, that so far the realist approach is concerned, at this point of time, both realism as well as liberal approaches are existing side by side. Though at this point of time, as the last question from Ronak had clearly maintained, that this realist approach still holds a priority or the top position, and liberalism still takes the back seat. But at this point of time, I would like to say that both liberalism and realism are existing side by side. But when you talk about justification to the terrorist acts, there is no justification to the terrorist acts. But how we explain these terrorist acts, why these terrorists emerged? Here I would like to say that there are some forces in the international system who are in inferior position, and they see the international system as it is dominated by some forces. So they want to change the status quo, and these forces want to change the status quo. So these terrorists, they perceive the neoliberals' agenda to introduce democratic systems in all the countries of the world as clash of civilization. They see that these democratic values and the liberal values will pose threat to the Islamic identities, their lifestyles, their cultures, and all that. I mean, this is ridiculous, because if you go to Dubai and other Arabian countries, their living standard or everything is they're using all the Western technologies and everything Western. But here, when we talk about this, why terrorists? It is absolutely another chapter, in order to understand why terrorism emerged, global terrorism emerged, because how they became inimical to United States, because Osama bin Laden had been abandoned by United States. Now they want to settle their scores with US. But the thing is that these terrorist groups, they want to change the status quo. They want to challenge the supreme power position of the United States and the West European countries. Okay, so they want to, so here I want to say that there is no justification to terrorist acts. But why terrorism is there, we have to understand that these terrorists want to change the status quo, and they want to challenge the power position of the dominant powers. So is it clear?
Yes, ma'am, but I'll still have to reframe my question because I missed some aspects. I'll try and, talk to Ruth about it.
Okay, let me, okay, just because whatever I understood that how we can justify, we cannot justify it. It is terrorist problem. It is
what I'm saying is, for example, an X country, it is, somehow sponsoring the terror cells which are operating and damaging things in Y country. So, for example, now the Y country is fed up and they are going to war against the other country because they know that this country has been supporting the terror cell on the back hand. So, earlier in the case of League of Nations and in UN, you just they say that an act of war is the last thing that should be done. And if a country starts or goes to war with another country, they'll go and support them, right? But if the Y country has clear justifications that no, we had to do it, they are hurting us in both economical and how do you say militarily.
Hmm.
For example, you can take the case of Pulwama, right?
Ah.
It was an attack on our base.
Ah.
So if the Indian state retaliates to Pakistan
Hmm.
in such a thing,
Ah.
would the UN still count it as breaking of the treaties that we've signed?
You know, I told you earlier also that this case, there are some terrorist groups which are acting as state-sponsored terrorism. Pakistan, it is the state-sponsored terrorism. They cannot go to war with India directly, so they are going through terrorist groups. And that's why India had reacted in Pulwama. But so far the UN is concerned, if United States, and in case of South Asia, particularly India and Pakistan, UN approach from the very beginning had been very, very biased. You know, when we took this matter to United Nations, we had signed the instrument of accession with Kashmir, and Kashmir was legally a part of India. At that time, Great Britain had declared Kashmir as a disputed matter. Why? Because they wanted to have their control on Gilgit and Baltistan. So they wanted that that part of Kashmir should remain with Pakistan. You know, so it was their Cold War calculations that had implicated their decision in the United Nations. So UN is not a world government. If their decisions are biased, and this UN is also dominated by the major powers, and major powers are always
So
guided by
UN is basically the UN and
Sorry,
UN agenda
Anand.
has
Anand,
always the
please.
last thing. Sorry.
Yeah, but please,
So
Anand, please continue this discussion because ma'am has to answer other questions now, and
yes,
your next
So
teacher
I
is
am
already
saying that
waiting.
United Nations decisions are not binding on any country. League of Nations had not could not take any action against Japan, Germany, Italy, any country. So United Nations, if any country's interests are contradicted by the UN decisions or anything, you know, any country is not bound to abide by them. So anyway, so next question is Aditya's question. He talks about balance of power. You know, what was this question? Aditya,
Yeah,
what was your question? Please, can you repeat?
Ma'am, I wondered that whether the efforts to achieve balance of power leads to more chaos rather than peace.
No. You know, balance of power, if you talk about balance of power, you know, then for security, you know, like India, if it acquired nuclear capability, this is for defense purpose. And I told you in the present context, no country can dare to occupy or capture another country. So each country has right to develop military capability to defend itself. So balance of power will not lead to chaos. Of course, those countries who are economically less powerful and defense expenditure is an additional burden on them, you know, then we have to think of the liberal policy. But if other countries' policies are not guided by liberalism, if other countries' policies are guided by realism, as I gave you the example of India and China's policies were guided by realism, and our policies were guided by liberalism during Nehruvian idea, then we had to change our stand. So I think balance of power, every country's policy or security can be ensured by balance of power. It will not create chaos. It can
and
maintain
now
peace.
the last question from Ronak,
Ronak,
because
huh?
then we have to wrap this up.
Okay. So Ronak's
Oh,
question.
just a second. Drishti also asked one more question. I'll just read it out. Drishti says, just like balance of power ensures protection of state, shouldn't there be balance of theories for attaining influential position or power?
Okay, Drishti, very good question. I will answer this question. Right. Okay. So this question is Ronak's question. That realism is still more important. Ronak, I must tell you that in the change scenario, US cannot go alone, and no country can go alone. But still, you're right. Realism is still the dominant approach. Each country has to look after its own interests first. For instance, environment. In case of environment, US has not signed Kyoto Protocol or Paris Agreement, you know, because it affects its national interest. US first is not selfish. I mean, every country looks after its national interest first, and then it thinks of collaboration. But at the same time, you cannot think of not collaborating with other countries. For instance, in case of environment, even in case of corona, all the countries are, if one country develops medicine or anything, all the countries of the world have, the country will share that scientific knowledge or medicine with other countries of the world also. Because if any problem happens in one country, the rest of the countries are bound to be affected by the quality of the life, and other things are bound to be affected in rest of the countries of the world also. So the world is globalized, and, in this world, the cooperation is important, but at the same time, each country has to fend for its national interest first, and then other. But at this point of time, cooperation is also important. For instance, in the field of those countries who are poor, if they are facing any ethno-religious conflicts, if they're facing any kind of problem of migration, diseases, poverty, hunger, IMF and World Bank, all these, they are helping all these countries so that, they're cooperating with these countries so that they should be able to survive. So here I'm saying that cooperation is also important, but no doubt, if each country gives priority to its national interest first. So I'm saying that neoliberalism and neorealism both are existing in the international system at present. Is it clear, Ronak?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Drishti, you have asked a wonderful question. Balance of power. I had told you earlier that these theories, are Eurocentric theories. These theories were created by the European countries on the basis of their own interests, on the basis of their own experience. They did not accommodate the interest of other countries. For instance, the global South is absolutely, their concerns were absolutely untouched in any of these theories. So if you look at the post-colonial societies, for them, quaternion realism is more suitable than these Western theories. Western theories. But unfortunately, after the independence, most of these countries, they also followed they were aping the Western theories of realism. But here I would like to say that we need to have new theories. We need to have new institutions. Even the institutions which are existing at this point of time, WTO, IMF, and World Bank, which are dominated by the major powers, and they influence the decision making of the other countries through these organizations, and they don't look into the interest of the countries of the global South. So definitely we need to have new institutions, new theories, which can, create a better world by shifting attention from the strategic factor to the humanitarian aspect. This is my answer to you, Drishti. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
So let's all thank ma'am together. Please switch on your audios. And
I'm sorry, I had to go very fast. I don't know whether I was everything was clear. Whether I could put my ideas across.
It was a very, very good lecture, ma'am. It was very good to hear you
Thank you very much.
long time. And let's all thank ma'am collectively. Can you switch on your audios? I can see so that we can have further interaction with ma'am via email or any queries, anything that we have. You can already see some. Maybe you can't see the chat part, but some comments are coming. This international student says, "Thank you, ma'am. I'm very satisfied after this." Ronak says, "Thank you, ma'am," and Arif says, "Very satisfied after this picture." Arif is from.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to hear. But your students are brilliant. I'm very happy that they had asked such kind of questions. It means they understand international politics pretty well.
Yeah.
And
it is
anytime they come to Delhi, I would like to invite them to the university. And we are coming up with a book on international relations, and it will be published by Sage in about a few months. I'll get it. So I will send it to your institution so that your students can go through that and can understand the international relations from the third world perspective. Yeah.
And whenever any of you go to Delhi, please meet ma'am in the university. Okay, I will.
You're most welcome. Yeah.
And Arif is from Indonesia. He just wrote a message. Yeah, he's written a message here. that he's very content and satisfied after this lecture.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. All right. I'm very happy to hear it.
Yeah, and thank you, ma'am, so much.
Thank you very
Very
much, Dhruv,
you, ma'am.
for giving
Thank
me
you,
this
ma'am.
opportunity.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
ma'am.
much. Thank you. Thank
The
you.
pleasure was not.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vartika also says, thank you, ma'am, it's our pleasure. And we are
Okay.
getting these comments on the chat bar on the right side. So
Okay.
it's a good way to. I think now students can leave for another class because sir might be waiting. I can
Okay.
just
Yeah.
continue. I can continue talking to ma'am here just for a
Okay.
few minutes.